Welcome back to the One Big Thing podcast. Guys, I'm really excited about this one today. This has been an incredible podcast journey for me. I've had the ability to interview some incredible people. Sometimes you have kind of like pinch me moments or like life comes full circle. Today's one of those days. Today, joining me on this episode is Mayor Glenn Jacobs of Knox County. For those that may not know the name Glenn Jacobs, he also served as Kane in the WWE, which for me growing up as a 90s kid, Kane and Undertaker were like my two protectors that I never met. And so to think that life is so surreal that today I got to interview Glenn Jacobs and get to know him as a person. Who's behind the mask, and now in him and his role in politics, who's the person at the podium or making change in communities. So this is a fascinating interview. If you're a lover of the WWE, you're going to want to check it out because Glenn gets into part of his life and history as Kane and even the characters that didn't quite make it before he eventually reinvented himself as Kane, but also just maybe life as a politician that I don't know for many of us that aren't in politics, we really understand all the moving parts. And I think what you're going to get out of this interview is that in both worlds, as an entertainer and a politician, he's always been Glenn, the human. And so I think we have to learn how to humanize people that are in a public setting or a public stage, whether they're an entertainer, a politician, or a CEO. They're real people just like you and I. So again, fascinating conversation today. I tried my best not to screw it up. I had a great time with Glenn. I appreciated him coming on. But you're going to hear about these dual roles that he's played and how in every instance he didn't quite feel like he belonged, but he was still able to be successful. And you see that now that he's been elected to a second term as the mayor of Knox County. So a real treat today. If you're brand new to the One Big Thing, would love for you to subscribe and follow this podcast to hear more interviews like this from people that are making a difference in the world. But as always, as Steve Campbell, the host of the show, thanks for being my guest and enjoy this episode with Glenn Jacobs. Well, welcome to the One Big Thing podcast. I'm your host, Steve Campbell. This is going to be an awesome, rocking interview today. I have Glenn Jacobs, who is the mayor of Knox County. For those that aren't from Knoxville, you may not know what Knox County is. He's our mayor. You may know a little bit about Mayor Jacobs, though, from his prior life, where he served as Kane in the WWE. So for a kid like me growing up in the 90s, watching professional wrestling, Mayor Jacobs, you were a staple in my life on Monday nights. And so now it's very cool that when I had relocated from upstate New York 3 years ago, and I had moved to the area, they said, "Hey, did you know who your mayor is?" And when I looked it up, I thought, I think every town, every county needs a mayor like Mayor Jacobs, who was chokeslamming people for real life. But I appreciate you being on the One Big Thing. For those that know you, family members, friends, those that are on to listen today, this is an interview style show. I have people from all walks of life, NFL athletes, instructors, business owners that kind of share their one big thing or their big ideas that can really help 30 and 40-year-olds that are trying to grow personally and professionally, become the best people that they can. Obviously we know you as Mayor Jacobs, but as I turn it over to you as a quick introduction, is there anything right at the forefront that you think people should know about you?
So I'd say a little bit about myself. I was actually born in an Air Force base. My dad's a 21-year military veteran. I was born in Spain. We moved back to the States when I was probably a year old or less. 4 years old, dad retired from the military. I grew up in very rural Northeast Missouri, wanted to play sports all my life. Unfortunately, I had an injury in college playing football that ended my football career and my aspirations, practical aspirations to become a professional athlete. And then I kind of fell into professional wrestling. I still want to do something involving athletics and all that sort of stuff. And that seemed like the vehicle through which I could do that. It was very blessed and fortunate. I had a long wrestling career, traveled the world, entertained millions of people all around the world, live and on TV. It's just been a remarkable life. And from there, I became mayor of Knox County in 2018. Ran for election in 2022. I guess I did a pretty good job my first term because I won that. And here we are today.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show and didn't even know that about you because an injury kind of derailed my sports career too. I was a D1 lacrosse player, but blew out my ACL in my last high school football game. What
Yep.
was injury? ACL?
ACL and meniscus and cartilage in my left knee.
Yeah. And, I've had prior guests on the show that are in, physical fitness. I had Zach Woodfin, who trains the Tennessee Titans as our strength coach. And we had talked about how sometimes the injuries or the setbacks that are unexpected are actually the setups for the things that we're about to do. So obviously you had this ACL injury, derailed football, but then went on to a pretty prolific career in the WWE as Kane. But what I thought is the dual aspects of your life, I think, are fascinating to me. I've always been fascinated by politics, but also entertainment. And it's very rare that you have somebody who makes the jump in the way that you did, from having a tremendous WWE, career, who I am a hero to many kids in my neighborhood today when I told them I was interviewing you, because they said, hey, make sure that he shouts me out or recognizes our neighborhood. You still, even though you're not in the WWE, carry such a lineage, or, such an awe that people have due to your physical stature, but also the presence that you had on screen. And I thought about, as I was kind of thinking about today, Kane was an iteration that came out of a couple of different characters. So I think what's cool about your life is you had an injury, which changed the trajectory of your life. You came into professional wrestling, and the first few characters that you tried to develop didn't really take off until you kind of found your spot. And when I think about us in our 30s and 40s that we're trying to find our spot, maybe we thought that marriage was going to be the quote unquote character that would change things, or having our first child or our second child. And I think there's a lot of people out there today that are just wondering, like, when is this going to take off or happen the way that it did? So was there anything from just your initial years in wrestling and the change to becoming Kane? Like, what was that like behind the scenes for you? When you had characters that you were coming out to the ring every night that just weren't taking off in the way that it was. Like, what is that process like for somebody in professional wrestling to say, this isn't working, I need to make an about turn?
My life has actually been much more defined by my failures than it has been my successes. As pointed out, I wouldn't have had the successes that I had had if I hadn't had the failures. And when I talk to young people, that's one of the most important things that I talk about, is you have to keep going no matter what, because you never know what life has in store for you. And often what happens is your dreams are going to come true, but maybe not in the way you thought that they would. And you just see that time and time again. So for me, when I got into wrestling, as you said, it's a hard road. Okay, when I started out, it was still it was different than it is now, in that you still had some smaller companies around. They weren't really competing with the big guys at the time. It was WWF, now WWE, and World Championship Wrestling out of Atlanta. So they weren't at that level, but you still have places you could go and learn, and just all that sort of stuff. Then when I got to WWE, I'd only been in the business 3 or 4 years. So I was still learning stuff, and I didn't feel like I belonged either. Here I am, all of a sudden I'm part of this big thing, this big WWE, and a few weeks before I'd been watching these guys on TV. So I really kind of held them in a bit of awe, and I just didn't feel like I belonged. And that was kind of a process for me, is just getting to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm good enough to do this. I belong here. I'm talented, just like all these other guys are. Then, yeah, it switches though, because you go from kind of like everybody else is the person that's making everyone money. Okay. And they're, for lack of a better term, they're the team captain. Right. And all of a sudden, here you are in that role, and it's a completely different role. And it's no longer just about, I don't know, it's no longer just about hanging out and having fun and being glad that you're there. All of a sudden, it becomes a lot more pressure, because you have people that are relying on you. And folks don't think about this, but you have literally thousands of people who are at least in part relying on you for their livelihood.
Sure.
And that just puts things in a completely different perspective. There's a lot more pressure. There's just, it's just a change. And for those folks that are still, kind of bouncing around, and I would still say in my life, I kind of do still bounce around with, what do I want to do next, or things like that. I think the key is just to keep going, to keep stepping, no matter what. I mean, life is, as you said, sometimes you get a bad break and you find out later that was the best thing that could ever happen to you. I think about if I had still played football, I mean, I might have been able to play in the NFL, but it had only been for a few years, and I wouldn't have been set for life like they are now. Just players weren't making that kind of money back then, especially I was an offensive lineman. So it's not like I would have been able to play 3 or 4 years in the NFL and retire and not have any financial worries for the rest of my life. And that was really my motivation. When I grew up, my family didn't have a whole lot of money, so I just wanted to have financial security is really why I did all that. But I look back, if you'd have told the 20-year-old me that blowing my knee out would be a good thing, I would have said, you're crazy. But now I look back and like, that's really probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because it got me thinking of moving my life in a different direction. So I would just tell people, no matter what, just to keep going. And no, don't be afraid to take risks either. I've made a living of stepping outside of my comfort zone. I'm naturally an introvert, so it's hard for me to. It's weird because I keep on picking these careers where I'm in the public eye, and that's not something that I'm really comfortable with, or something that I really, and a lot of folks, that's where they want to be, and that is not me. I do not like that at all. But that's also what I've had to do to take advantage of the opportunities that have presented themselves to me. So I would say, keep going no matter what. Don't be afraid to take risks, and also understand that there's opportunities come, and sometimes you just don't recognize them. I've seen that happen in my life. And when an opportunity comes along, make sure you take advantage of it, because you never know where it is going to take you.
Let's take a break to hear a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the Unleashing Leadership podcast. Join Travis Moss, seasoned entrepreneur and business leader, on a transformational journey of leadership exploration. In this thought-provoking podcast, Travis shares his invaluable insights and experiences gained from 2 decades of managing diverse businesses, which include small family enterprises, Fortune 500 companies, and his own successful startups. Through candid storytelling and real-life examples, he unveils the profound truth that success or failure ultimately rests upon a leader's ability to recognize and unleash the potential in others. Start listening to the Unleashing Leadership podcast today, available on all major podcast platforms. Yeah, well, before we jump into kind of the life and politics too, I'm just thinking about you and these characters that you played before you developed Kane, and you had mentioned that there's so much that people don't realize riding on these decisions that you're making, family members that are financially being supported, your marketing team.
Right.
Was there a moment? I mean, obviously, I remember when Kane was introduced that first night, you're standing backstage, you'd played all these other characters, and now you're standing there in the big red suit and the mask and the story and the build up. I mean, we don't know what it's like standing under pyrotechnics, hearing your song played. Now knowing and seeing you on camera, it seems like you have a very inviting, jovial type personality, but here you're supposed to be this intimidating, almost monster on screen. Is it just in your head when you have that Kane mask on, you're like, crap, and like you just got to go and no one knows it? Because we don't see that, right? And so for the people I've had on that have played in the NFL, this is a very unique platform that I have, that I get to talk to musicians that are selling millions of records and star quarterbacks in the NFL. And you hear from them, they're normal people. Like I can't say you and I, because you're 7 foot and I'm not. But for normal people that are, maybe they're not wearing a mask as Kane or whatever. Maybe they're leading a business or a nonprofit or just truthfully raising kids. There's a lot riding on them. Was there like a moment though where you didn't fit in? Was there like a moment in your career that you were like, this is freaking cool?
Yeah, there were many moments like that. In fact, when I look over my career, we were working all the time, so everything was always a blur. And I wish that I had enjoyed it more and taken time to really savor things. And when you talk about being backstage and all that, it's a lot like an athletic game. I mean, you have to put yourself in a certain place emotionally, and a little different because in a game you're still you, but you still, like, for someone like me, I remember my high school basketball coach would talk about stepping outside of your comfort zone, because when I was playing basketball in high school, I was a timid, shy kid. I wasn't aggressive on the court, and that's what I had to do to be successful. So, just stuff like that, just putting yourself psychologically and mentally into a certain position. But yeah, man, just even that first night and walking out, and as you said I didn't add some characters which were not successful, and to walk out and like the reaction of the audience and to wow, it was the first time when I debuted that I as Kane that I really felt like I belonged in WWE, that was like a superstar, right? And along the way you kind of get used to that after a while, but every once in a while like something will happen, and like you get introduced at WrestleMania and you're walking down the ramp at AT&T Stadium and there's over 100,000 people there and they're all looking at you. That stuff's pretty cool. And then, of course, in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, man, I hope I don't trip because it's going to be really embarrassing if that happens with all these people.
Kane's inner thoughts.
Yeah, but it's, stuff like that, man, is so cool and something that most people will never get to experience.
Well, and this is why I always wish I had more time with people, because my brain goes a mile a minute. And I just think about, like, in entertainment, you have the opportunity to say, like, Mulligan, I'm this new guy now, and we'll mostly accept, like, okay, you were the dentist and now you're Kane. Like, that's fine. I think as people, though, we struggle is you don't always get that get out of jail free card, right? When you blow it with another human or a relationship, you can't just show up with a mask and be like, now I'm this person and we accept it. And so when I think about your career, which folks go on YouTube, your first night when you came out as Kane, I mean, I think it's very cool to hear from you, like, don't fall. But in my mind as a teenager watching you, I was like, did he really get burned in a fire? So to now think of, like, I see you and the difference you're making here in Knox County, and even just in your role in politics, you spent, your career as Kane not speaking, and now you're speaking behind a platform all the time. And so, what I thought would be cool for part of this conversation today is, I think a lot of us are trying to figure out, like, where do I fit in this world? Like I see stuff happening on the news every night. Some of it I agree with, some of it I disagree with. I see what's happening in my communities, but I don't know like what difference I really make. And so for you, like, what was the role into politics? You had obviously a very thriving career in the WWE. Most people wouldn't assume that would be the next. It's not like the NFL and you go into, NFL live or anything like that. So for you, was there always a love of politics, or what was that process from the WWE, and how did you even get into the political realm?
That's a great question. I've always been interested in government and politics. I didn't have a love for it. Mostly for me, it was trying to keep politicians off my back. But it's just, as you talked about, right? The fact that I felt that I could make a difference. I've had a life that I never thought would have been possible when I was a little kid. Again, I grew up, my family didn't have a whole lot of money. We didn't have any connections, no political connections or business connections or anything like that. And I was able to travel the world and entertain people and provide my family with a life that I wouldn't have thought possible. And when I think about that, it's actually impossible that someone like me could be so blessed to do those things. But I'm a product of the American dream. I was able to find something I was good at. And in this country, if you do that and you work hard and you get a break here or there, there's no ceiling to what someone can accomplish in America. And I really do believe that in the free enterprise system, by improving our lives, we improve the lives of people around us, and vice versa. One of my favorite quotes is from Zig Ziglar, who said, you can have everything you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And really, that's what it's all about. So for me, it was just, I didn't want to feel like when at the end of my life, I look back and said, I was given all these wonderful opportunities, all these wonderful things, and I didn't do anything to pass it on to the next generation. It's especially important to me now because I have two grandkids, and I have a 15-year-old granddaughter and a 9-year-old grandson, and I often wonder about what kind of world are they getting? What kind of America are they getting? Will they have the chance to live the life that they want to live like I did, to build a life that they want to live? And right now, I would say it's a little iffy. And that might sound weird, as county mayor, what can you do about that? Well, I do have a bully pulpit, and I can at least do some things locally here, and I can have some influence. So that was the real reason for getting into politics, was I just want to make sure that our country stays strong and that there's opportunities available for young people as they're growing up.
Hey everyone, Steve Campbell. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If it's made an impact on you, I would love to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. but I would also love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. Your ratings and review help other listeners know that this show is worth their time. So thank you so much for tuning into The One Big Thing, and let's enjoy the rest of the episode. Well, and one thing that you had just said, kind of as we were talking about the WWE, is you wish you had enjoyed it more. And that's one of my greatest fears as a father. I have 4 kids that are 8 years old and younger. And I mean, in between helping my, team run our businesses and podcasting and being involved in my church and kids sports, I coach all these things. There gets to a point where it becomes a lot. And you have self-doubt. You have imposter syndrome. Am I a good dad? Am I a good husband? Or am I raising my kids right? And I think we can fall into the illusion of when they're older, things will be easier. So just get to that point. And I think what I recognize in what you just said is you wish you had enjoyed the process more as Kane in your WWE. Has there been anything super practical for those that are out there today that in this role now in politics that allows you, it's kind of like your wedding day. Like if we all could have gone back to our wedding day, we wish we would have paused more throughout the day and looked around and taken inventory, because you start the day and then the next thing you know, you're hitting the hotel bed and you're like, where did our wedding day go? Has there been anything on this side of politics that's not entertainment, it's real life change? But has there been anything as you've matured in your career that does allow you in a way to take in the moment or the people you're meeting or the lives you're changing? Is it journaling? Is there anything that you do now that you didn't do back then that you wish maybe you knew about?
Well, prioritizing as far as like with family and making sure that you do set some time aside for them and making that a priority. Too often what happens is that becomes flexible, and you know what I mean. And instead of that being the priority, the other stuff's actually the priority, and you have some time, but if it has to get knocked off, so be it. And I get it. We're all we all have stuff sometimes that does come up, but just making, as far as the family stuff, making that a priority. I don't take notes. I don't keep journal, which is terrible of me, but I just kind of keep, things up here. And I think, to answer your question, I think a lot of it is just experience and realizing that you have to make a conscious decision to kind of slow down every once in a while and enjoy where you're at least be cognizant of that. When I was in WWE, I mean, we were on the road 250 days a year, and it was always New York one day, Albany, New York the next day, Syracuse the next day. Then you get on a plane and fly to Denver, and it was just all the time. It was a blur, and you never had time to actually sit back and say, this is pretty cool. We're selling out every arena that we go to.
Yeah.
You just never had that. And to digest that. So now I'm at a point to where, yes, I can actually every once in a while slow down and not necessarily enjoy things, but at least recognize that I'm in the moment, as opposed to always being, where do I have to be tomorrow? What do I have to be doing at that particular moment? And of course, again, that's maturity, and that's also just a conscious decision. It's not necessarily mindfulness in that, when you think of meditation, mindfulness, but it is mindfulness of being aware and much more self-aware than I was years ago when I was just literally on the treadmill trying to go as fast as I could all the time.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of us too in the political realm, we don't fully understand all the moving parts that happens for somebody as a mayor or as a governor, as a senator, kind of getting started in that. So for those that, aren't aware, what has that process been like you on the political side now for what can really change? And, like even for somebody who might have an interest in saying like, I want to see my community thrive, or I want to run for a position. Like, what is that process like for somebody going from an idea to actually, do you just get people around you and say, I want to run for this position? Or what is getting into politics? Like, what are the steps for that?
Yeah, that is one thing, is just talking with folks. Every once in a while I have someone reach out to me that's thinking about running for office, and what is it really like, and what do I need to do? So yes, you talk to the folks around you. You look at, if you're looking at a certain position, sometimes people run for stuff and then they realize that they can't necessarily do what they thought they could do because that position doesn't have the authority to do that. For instance, before I became mayor, I thought the mayor could do all this stuff. Then I became mayor and realized that actually the mayor can't do a lot of those things. And I need help from commission or whoever in order to get that stuff done. And just like everything else, you balance it out. There are some positives, there are some negatives. Running for elected office, no matter where you are, it's a time-consuming process. It can be a full-time job itself, and yet you do. I mean, it stinks, but money's part of it too. You have to be able to raise, especially when you get up to state and federal stuff, you have to be able to raise some money. How do you do that? All those sort of things are decisions that you have to make. Ultimately too, is, do you just have the personality to do it? That's not everybody does, right? Or would you be a better fit someplace else? So, and doing something else. And I think obviously, I know people who've either gotten into politics, hated it, did something else constructive for the community, or just decided this is not for me. I don't want to do that. But I would rather do this, and they've had a huge impact on the community as well. So yeah, the process is just like when you're thinking of what are you going to major in college, or where do you want your, what do you want to, what are you interested in as a career? It's a lot the same decisions that you make if you decide to run for office.
Yeah. And I know we only got about 5 minutes here. The last thing that I was thinking about, Glenn, in your world is, you run for, when you're in WWE, you're an entertainer. People pay a ticket to watch you. They can love and hate you as a character. When you're in politics, people can love or hate you depending on what you stand for. There is no hiding. When you say, I stand up for X, Y, Z, you expose yourself to people that are going to say, that's my guy, or how dare he. Are there things on this side of the equation, because you were in packed out arenas where everybody yelled your name and loved you, and now you're in the political realm, that when you stand up for certain things, you alienate groups of people that don't understand? I mean, what has that kind of been like for you, that emotional roller coaster? Has that just strengthened your resolve? Or are there things that listeners that may not understand about politics that they have more control over now that you've been in kind of the machine, if you will? Like, are there things that we could be doing in our communities when you want to stand up for things that outside of a voting day, most people don't realize that they can be a part of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Voting is certainly very important, but it's just one aspect of the whole political, I should say, public square. Just advocacy and making your voice heard is also a huge deal. Sometimes what happens is someone has an idea and it seems like a really great idea, but they haven't heard from the other side of how it's going to impact them. And look, if you're intellectually honest, you at least have to say, okay, these people don't like it. I think it's great, but these people don't like it. Why don't they like it? And then sometimes, well, there's oh my gosh, they're right. Other times it's like, okay, they got a point, but if we do this, it addresses their concerns. See, things actually become better when you talk with folks who might be in the opposition. Just nowadays, I think with the country as divided as it is, I wish we would do more of that, because it doesn't mean that we have to be mortal enemies. Sometimes we just don't agree on things too. And sometimes we're trying to get to the same place. We just see different paths going there. For me, I mean, I believe in what I believe in. I'm always willing to listen to folks, but in the end, I have to do what I believe, or I can't sleep at night. That's just how I'm built. That doesn't mean that I hate people who disagree with me. Far from that. I don't like it when people yell and scream at me, but nevertheless, if you're going to tell me, hey, this is wrong and these are the reasons why, okay, we can have that conversation. And certainly I think that's constructive. But in the end, and I think one of the issues that we have with politics nowadays is, there's no middle ground. We don't talk, but at the same time, too many politicians also stick their fingers in the wind and just say which way's the wind blowing, and I'm going to vote this way or do this according to that. And that's not where you want to be either. I think we need to hit a happy medium where you're guided by certain principles, but you're also willing to talk to people. And sometimes you're like, yeah, they got a point. Now, how can I make this work in a way that doesn't contradict my principles. And sometimes you can actually do that.
Mhm.
And that's a win for everybody. So, you should never go in thinking I'm always right. You should go in thinking that this is my position. This is why I have this position. And these folks over here might be thinking this, but they might be right about something too. And I need to keep that in mind. But for folks that aren't inclined to get in politics, and I certainly understand that, like I said, advocacy, just being involved in your community, taking an active role in your kids' lives. I think one
Yep.
of the issues that our country faces is we've put our schools in a very uh, at a disadvantage in that they're literally now in some cases we think that they're the primary rearers of our kids, and they're not. I mean, to me, I always thought that the education that you got at school was very important, but it's kind of really supplementing what you got at home. And now the schools, in a lot of cases, they're it, and that's not a good place to be either. I think families and parents need to take a much more active role. As a generalization, that can be difficult because there's just we're so busy and so many things going on. But nevertheless, too often I feel that we just leave it up to schools, and then we don't get the result that we want, and then we blame it on the schools. And it's like, well, it's kind of difficult to do what exactly you want to do when that's really the job of the family.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, I want to thank you as we bring this one to close because there's so much more I feel like I could talk to you about the parallels in your life. I got to imagine that in your role now in politics, just like in WWE, you don't feel like you fit in. I don't know that there's many 7-foot tall politicians out there. And, the role that you're playing, obviously being successful and being reelected to a second term, sometimes politics can seem like characters on TV that we watch. You know the names, you know what people look like, regardless of what side of the aisle they sit on. They seem like figureheads that don't do a lot. But when you live in a county like we do and we see the work that you're doing, regardless, I want to champion you for your work because you're out there taking the boos and the cheers from people that you don't have a mask on anymore. Sometimes I wish you could throw that sucker on and chokeslam some people, but that's not too civil. But I just appreciate as a public servant you putting yourself and your family out there because I think just like the WWE, we don't always realize that politicians are also human beings, just like you were as a wrestler. And you have to go back to your spouse and your kids and talk to them about what's going on. So, regardless of how somebody votes, just understanding that civility standpoint and the fact that you can make a difference with advocacy, but also raising your kids. That's the nucleus. And that's a lot of my listeners. So much of what you said, your setbacks can become your setups. And sometimes, even though you don't fit in, you still have to find your way and reinvent yourself until you become the person you're meant to be. And you've been able to do that on both sides, both as a professional wrestler and now as a politician. So for somebody here that lives in this state, appreciates the work that you do, I appreciate you coming on the One Big Thing. I wish you all the success and all the endeavors that are coming your way, because I'm sure there's some great ones coming. But I just appreciating in the busyness of your life, you taking these 30 minutes to inspire and encourage a lot of us, I think, that are trying to make a difference in this world. Sometimes we might just need to reinvent ourselves a little bit until we find that spot.
That's exactly right. Thanks. I've had a good time. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Well, thanks for listening to that episode. I'm going to be honest, man. I feel like throwing on a Kane mask and chokeslamming some people. I mean, you got to love Glenn Jacobs and the work that he's doing, both in his world as a WWE wrestler as Kane, but also now just as a public servant serving as the Knox County mayor. I mean, this is somebody who has left a life of entertainment where he was wearing a mask, nobody heard his voice, he sold out arenas, to now becoming somebody who's in the public eye, that's loved by some, hated by others as a politician. And for you and I, no matter what community you live in or how you feel or how you vote, I think just having a respect for people that are out there trying to make a difference, and not these people you see on TV that are lifelong politicians, but people like Glenn that have given up a life of entertainment or a business to go into really making a difference in the communities that they live. So I just appreciate and want to champion Glenn for coming on the show. And if you're brand new to the One Big Thing, hope it's not your last stop. I hope you'll check out other great guests that I've had on like Glenn. And if you are interested in topics or hearing from people, I'm hoping that this starts a movement of WWE wrestlers, because I'll tell you, man, there's a grab bag of people that I would love the opportunity that I grew up watching to like this conversation with Glenn, get to know who's behind these people and humanize them a little bit. So as always, I appreciate you guys more than you know. Thank you for being a fan of the One Big Thing. I can't wait to bring more exciting guests to you. We are just beginning to scratch the surface on what this show can become. So I appreciate you coming on. I hope that this inspired you to move the ball forward in your life. And as always, thanks for being my guest on the One Big Thing.